Time for another episode of the TwinSpires Weekend Rewind. Nick Tammaro here. Who better to be joined by to recap a loaded weekend of three-year-old prep races and a few races beyond that than the voice of the Kentucky Derby himself, Travis Stone. Travis, it's been a few months since we were here. Last time we were talking, it was about the Remsen. Now we've seen all those horses run back, so we're doing good on our 60-day layoff.
It's well, we haven't run yet, but no, we're right in it now already into February. 2 more rounds after this.
We wouldn't trade spots with anybody, though. We would say that for sure, right? That's how we know we're ready off the brief break. But sure. It was a loaded weekend that the weather actually changed a bit in terms of how it shook out. And it began on Friday with Kentucky Derby prep action at Aqueduct and Oaklawn. And so we're going to take a look at both of those races to get started. Going to go chronologically. It's the only way I can work things out in terms of remembering along with the voices in my head. So we'll start with the Withers, which was won by Talk to Me Jimmy, and we're going to get a replay of the Withers as we talk through it a little bit. I think the biggest thing that I wanted to talk about out of this race, Travis, is that this racetrack was awfully kind to front-running types. We saw that happen a little bit over the course of the 3 days where they ran at Aqueduct last week. Felt like Talk to Me Jimmy took full advantage of it, but it was more the no-show performances to me of Schoolyard Superman and Otinho that you take out of this race.
Yeah, unfortunately, I just think it's hard to get a full understanding of this race going forward. Given the way the track was playing, it just really felt like sort of an inside forward-favoring trip all week up at Aqueduct. I thought it was an okay effort from Grittiness if you consider that. However, at the end of the day, it feels like this just might end up being a slow race and sort of a negative key race going forward. Credit to the winner who has gotten better, though. It's not like he's been a total aberration. His maiden win back in November was stout. It's just good, it's a lot tougher from here, and he's going to have to get a lot faster.
I mean, to put it in context, this horse was coming out of 2 New York bred races, the most recent of which was a maiden win at a mile, now going to the mile and an eighth of the Withers, usually the kind of jump that horses really can't withstand. But I think part of why he was able to get such an easy lead, too, was that the rider aboard Schoolyard Superman sort of happily deferred around the first turn, and Mailata, who really looked like the speed on paper, didn't get out of the gate. So it does feel like he was really the beneficiary of circumstance. It ended up being a Brisnet speed figure of 96, which puts him among the better 3-year-olds that ran last week. I just have a hard time buying this as far as really firmly putting him on the Derby trail. And, let's be honest, it's a early February Aqueduct race, right? So it feels like he's going to have to show us quite a bit more before we really put him on any kind of contender list.
Is the Gotham 1-turn mile again, or is it?
Yeah. It is, yeah. So I don't know if he'll come back there. It feels like these trainers mainly want to keep them around 2 turns once they've done so. And in order to do that, he'll either await the wood or go out of town, which I don't really anticipate being the case by Rudy Rodriguez. But we'll see what some of the news is on Talk to Me Jimmy coming out of it. Again, a New York bred with the big win there. Well, also on Friday afternoon, we saw a prep race down at Oaklawn, which was won by Silent Tactic, and the familiar connections of Jack Oxley and Mark Casse. It was, of course, the other Jack Oxley and Mark Casse horse that was the more fancied in the wagering. That was Strategic Risk, who had won the Smarty Jones very impressively back in early January, but his stablemate got the best of them. And, as we look at the replay of this race, Travis, one of the things that really stood out to me, and obviously you're a race caller, and I moonlight as a race caller as well, but this horse was ridden with an extreme amount of confidence, right? And when you're sort of panning through the field as a race caller and you see a jockey that's as high in the saddle with 3/8 to go as Christian Torres was, it was mainly a matter of getting this horse to open space. And once he did right here at the 3/16 pole, that was it.
Yeah, I'm kind of annoyed. I know you and I talked pre-race. I liked this horse on Friday. I was kind of hoping to get closer to the morning line, and I kind of got a little bit gun shy when I saw he was 10 or 11 to 1 in early wagering. And he did look like a horse that was just waiting for things to develop on the far turn. But here's my dissenting opinion was the way that far turn looked, I felt like we were watching like the Alan Jerkins at Saratoga, where the race is ready to collapse because everybody in front has gone too quick, vis-a-vis this being a bunch of 1-turn horses that he beat. Soldier and Diplomat stopped on a dime at Churchill last time. He ran very well this weekend, but he also kind of got a little bit leg weary. I think Butane is more of a 1-turn horse than 2. And so I feel like this might be more of an aberration than signal going forward in terms of of true durable implications. Now he has gotten faster at each and every start, but he just has this race on paper now that's probably going to yield a much shorter price next time. And I got to be honest, I'm going to be against, and I'm going to have to see it again against tougher competition and horses we know want to go this far.
So I'll start off asking you a couple of different questions. First one is, does this horse just look like Sandman 2.0 to you?
I didn't even think of that. I could probably get there. I still think, yeah, I could probably get, I know what you're saying. And yeah, I would say so. I know what you mean.
So the other thing, and obviously we're guys that like to break down races, look at moves that are made. I've never been as concerned with who wins races. I want to know how they're run. What do you make of the fact that the second and third place finishers really were there just about the whole time, right? So it's not as if this was some big collapse. It was to me a race where it was a bit of an accordion, right? They all came together and then one sort of ran by everybody. So I'm not really making an excuse for him, but I want to make sure that I at least sort of firmly implant in my mind this wasn't a giant pace collapse.
No, I just visually felt like horses that had hit a wall. They didn't want to go this far. And then I'm also, when it comes to trip watching, when you like right here, look how condensed this field is. Like they're
Yeah.
fairly tightly packed still. That's usually in my opinion, a negative sign. Um, Gapped out fields on dirt are more the norm and what you kind of want to see. I mean, look at this right here. There's still a lot of horses involved for like some of the placings. I mean, to be fair, he did win it well, and he crushed them. But it's not like it came back this huge number, and you're like, oh man, this is journalism and sovereignty all over again.
Right, 92 brisnet speed number, obviously nothing to write home about. The horses that you reference being sprinters in the future, and I agree with you. I think Soldier and Diplomat and Butane are horses that we're going to see in a race that you referenced a little bit earlier, the H. Allen Jerkins. They are in the hands of Hall of Famers like Bob Baffert and Steve Asmussen. Are they going to be able to squeeze another furlong and a half out of those horses? I don't know. I mean, I don't want to completely. We talked pre-race. We both didn't really like Butane. He ran better than I expected. Quite honestly, he fought on. It wasn't a particularly fast race. He's going to have to get a lot better, but I guess they're all deserving of one more shot around two turns. I think we all kind of know what the end result's going to be, though, right?
Yeah, I mean, Butane did run better than we thought, which I also would consider that to be a negative. I mean, like it kind of dresses up the race a little bit.
I mean, he ran better than we thought and finished in a photo for second and got an 80 Beyer speed figure, right? So it's not
Yeah,
exactly like he really turned heads. I do often give horses a little bit more credit in their first two-turn start. This was the first two-turn start for him. Soldier and Diplomat did run about as well as he had in the majority of his two-year-old races. Rancho Santa Fe continues to kind of underwhelm. Looks like a horse that probably got good enough to win an allowance race at Keeneland and just hasn't really gotten appreciably better. I thought if you told me that was how it was going to shake out and the pace was going to be fast enough to get Silent Tactic home from deep in the pack, I would have told you that Rancho Santa Fe was almost certainly going to be in the exacta, and he wasn't. So I was a little underwhelmed by him. Well, let's take a look at the updated points leaderboard. This, of course, will include some horses that we're going to still yet to talk about, which includes the Sam F. Davis winner and the Robert B. Lewis winner. But Silent Tactic vaults to the top of the heap right now. Nobody ends up framing the Thursday leaderboard at the Masters. It's the Sunday one, of course, but we have to talk about the leaderboard along the way. And right now, Silent Tactic leads it along with Renegade. And that will segue well into our Saturday conversation, where there were two key Kentucky Derby preps. The first of which was at Tampa Bay Downs in the Sam F. Davis, a race that was won very comfortably and convincingly, in my opinion, by Renegade. And you and I spoke in this space about the Remsen when it took place a couple of months ago. And what we were unsure of was how the race was going to stack up as far as all of them moving forward. It looked like it could have been a little on the slow side. It didn't really hold up to the sniff test against the Demoiselle. It didn't look like it was. It looked like it was slow when you juxtaposed it against the Cigar Mile, which came a half an hour later and was exceptionally fast. I'm wondering if that might have been a little bit of an aberration, because I got to tell you, I thought Renegade looked really good.
yeah. I don't know if it really like we can apply what we said to the Remsen in terms of discounting it, if you
It
will.
also may not
Uh,
matter.
Yeah, I mean, this to me looked like a horse that took a really strong step forward into its 3-year-old year. Wide, sustained move. I don't particularly think Wayne's Law is going to threaten anybody in terms of a Grade One dirt race for 3-year-olds going the rest of the way. So maybe there's a little bit of a question mark there. But at the same time, Renegade won by nearly 4 lengths over him. I loved his stride in the stretch. He's finishing the race strong. It's not like he's shortened stride. This is a very, very strong effort, and certainly one to look at going forward. Flatters the Paladin a little bit as well, who ran well and the won the Rebs and ran well. He's going to run this weekend, I guess. So yeah, it was a good weekend for Team Rapoli Pletcher. They had a lot of horses run well or sneaky well, and they're well set up for the next round or two.
Yeah, still a couple to come, of course. I think the question with this particular race, and you referenced Wayne's Law, who was the runner up at 48-1, who was coming in from a third place finish in the John Lafitte at Delta, which is not a race that generally is going to yield many Kentucky Derby trail starters. The other horses in this race that were expected to run well were the Puma and Confessional, and the Puma did have a little bit of trouble along the way. He's a horse that, of course, is still a maiden. Confessional had been effective up to this point, going shorter. This was his first try around 2 turns, and really what he was known for up to this point was having gotten drilled by nearly at 3-5 in his prior start. So I think the asterisk here, if you're going to apply one, is the competition. Obviously, Renegade will face better horses in his next start, but you're looking at the Puma now, who is the 3 here, and he does get in a little tight here, awaiting some racing room. Ultimately gets it. I think the rider had to kind of make a couple of decisions there about where he wanted to go. I hope they bring this horse down in class and just let him break his maiden and see potentially what kind of maybe second half of the year 3-year-old they have. But I understand people want to get to the Derby. I think the key to it, as you alluded to, is that you want to see these newly turned 3-year-olds run better than they did at 2. And that's exactly what Renegade did. So to me, it checks that ever important box. And he also has the pedigree of a horse that really should take to more ground without issue.
And then just to juxtapose it against the Southwest, like if you visualize both of those races in their final 3 to 4 furlongs, where Silent Tactic was kind of waiting as the race came back to him, Renegade went and got these horses, starting to the far turn with a sustained 3 or 4 wide move. I get it that they might not have been. Butane and Sojourn Diplomat might have been on the whole a little bit of a better competition for Silent Tactic, but I like the way Renegade finished up better. And so, in terms of a heads up there, I mean, give me Renegade all day long next time.
Never a bad thing to break your maiden as the 6-5 favorite in a Kentucky Derby points race. That's exactly what Renegade did. Of course, he crossed the wire first in a maiden race, but was disqualified last year at Aqueduct. Looking forward to wherever we see Renegade surface next. The other Kentucky Derby points race from Saturday was the Robert B. Lewis out at Santa Anita Park, and it was won unsurprisingly by a Bob Baffert runner, but it wasn't the Bob Baffert runner that I think a lot of people anticipated. Plutarch, who has had kind of a circuitous route to the Derby trail, running on turf a trio of times, earning a Grade 1 placing last year as a 2-year-old, but now really finally putting it all together, getting the better of Intrepido, who had beaten him a couple of times prior to this start. Travis, I like the race. Plutarch ran here quite a bit. Obviously, you have to love the pedigree. It's a reminder we're getting old, that we're now seeing progeny of horses like Stellar Wind work their way onto the Derby trail. She didn't run that long ago, in fairness to us. I like this effort from Plutarch, and I think he now becomes one of the more interesting Baffert horses, in large part because he's actually active.
He's got a foundation too. He's run quite a bit as a 2-year-old, which is a good sign and kind of a nice move forward here. My one opinion out of this race though is I don't want to give up on Secured Freedom yet, who was kind of buried at the back of the not buried. I was outside, but at the back of the pack, 3 or 4 wide on both turns, and you can see him sort of. He's still 3 or 4 wide at the back. He's not last anymore. But right here, you wouldn't give anything for him to hit the board. But if you watch from the top of the stretch to the wire, particularly in the last 16th, this horse finds some stride late. And this race was not coming apart. And I was watching the replay is wondering, well, is he even really gaining ground on the leaders? Might be an optical illusion. But right about here, you can start to see he is picking up some ground. And I don't know if we have the gallop out on this, but if you watch the gallop out, he goes right by the top 2. To me, this is a horse that is going to be a little bit underrated. Yeah, going right by him. A little bit underrated next time. And if there's any sort of pace in the next round, I think he's kind of interesting. Taking nothing away from Plutarch, who obviously did things well as well, but had a little bit of a softer trip, even though he was kind of between horses early. Is this race on the whole like going to be a very key Kentucky Derby prep? I think we just have to wait and see. They're going to have to get a little bit faster. But to me, Secured Freedom was the one I was like, nah, I want to see where he pops up next. He might be worthy of a gamble.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I think a lot of his issues were caused by a poor gate break. Which, I mean, if he's out of the gate cleaner, he's going to be more forwardly placed, and he's going to be able to use a little bit more of that grinding type style. But in watching the race live and watching the replay back, I was taken by the exact thing that you laid out, which is that you felt like this horse was really swimming, turning for home. He was kind of climbing, even coming into the stretch, and then all of a sudden, really did hit his stride at the eighth pole. I think he's a horse deserving of another opportunity as well. The thing about Plutarch, and one of the things I've always struggled with regards to Baffert horses is when he puts them on the turf, it usually is a bad sign. And he did seem sort of adamant about wanting this horse to run on turf, but he got him back to the dirt, trained reportedly very well prior to this race, and certainly delivered on it. So I'm going to be intrigued where how Bob sort of divides everybody and goes a kind of the divide and conquer route with all these 3-year-olds. I mentioned he's active. Of course, I was alluding to the fact that both Boyd and Brandt are on their way back. We don't know when they're going to run again. We obviously know that both of them are really top level talents based on what we saw. We have a lot of questions to answer about those. But one of the things we know is that Plutarch certainly is bred to go long. He runs like a horse that can handle it. He's got a lot of tactical speed. I thought Florent Geroux would be a really good fit for him, and it played out that way. He's a jockey who wants to be a little bit more forward as well. So a 94 Brisnet speed rating for Plutarch, who earns some valuable Kentucky Derby points, but I would assume we'll see him at least once more, maybe twice more before the Kentucky Derby. And I don't know how much you can read into where Bob puts these horses. He tends to get them all into the right spot, though, for certain. I don't think we've mentioned the first and third horses extensively. I wouldn't really take anything away from Intrepido, who finished second either. I wouldn't give up on him altogether if you like him.
Yeah, he's got to continue to move forward. One comment on the Plutarch stuff and him being sort of moved to turf thread as a 2-year-old. He was very clearly not one of the top 2 or 3 horses in the barn at that time. And so Bob has a roster and a pecking order. And if you don't have one of the top 3 2-year-olds on dirt, you might as well try him out on turf. So I wouldn't look too much into that as it being like, as Bob's saying, this horse can't run. I think it was probably more of a depth chart conversation. And now that some of those others have been weeded out or aren't even back racing yet, this guy gets elevated up to first string, and he delivered.
Yeah, I think the horse that probably lost the most on Saturday, in addition to losing the race, was Desert Gate, because he was barely a participant and he was 6-5 in this race. Obviously, very disappointing. Stuck inside the whole way. Didn't really get much of a chance. I would have expected him to get a much more forwardly placed trip. So I don't really know if we can take much out of there positive in terms of Desert Gate. He's got to be a horse that we need to see something substantial next time, right?
I've never been a huge Desert Gate fan
Me
anyway.
either.
And I hate to say it, but yeah, I'm not. I don't want to say I'm surprised, but I'm not surprised.
A lot of times this whole squadron of Bob Baffert horses, there's one that kind of pops up early that just doesn't really seem to deliver as time goes by. And I'm trying to remember as I talk the horse that was like that in 2024 into 2025, and he kind of turned him into a sprinter, and he just didn't really deliver on the early promise. But
Who
it's
was that?
probably it
Not,
was I
not,
think it was a Pegram horse too, and I just can't remember who it was. I want to say he ran in the Pat Day Mile.
I
So
can't.
I don't. It was one of the ones that won early on, and
He
definitely
had a
not.
few of them that like ended up running well in the race at Saratoga and some of the one-turn races. I just can't think of their names now. But
Yeah, yeah, it
Newgate
was.
like type horses or something. I can't remember.
Yeah, and obviously he had Madigan Road that he sort of thrust into the Derby Trail, who was a late addition to it. As far as a horse that came along a little bit later, the horse that I'm trying to think of is Gaming. Gaming
Oh
was one
yeah,
that was
yeah,
good early on, yeah, and just didn't. The pack caught up to him pretty quickly, right? And then once they
yeah.
did, at that point you're in trouble, right? If they're getting better, then if you don't, then you've got a lot of work to do. So.
Yep.
Uh, that was the Robert B. Lewis. Let's head back east and talk about some fillies in the Suncoast at Tampa Bay Downs. And this was the seasonal debut of Rapoli Stables' really impressive Demoiselle winner, Zany, who took the Suncoast in what I thought was pretty fine fashion. Did so in a similar kind of way in many ways to Renegade. Made a big move around the turn. Little bit late getting to the front in comparison to Renegade, but did so now coming off the turn. Beat a horse in Life of Joy who had run some very nice races as a 2-year-old. So I do want to upgrade the performance in terms of competition. It does feel like Zany is still a little green, only career start number 3. Obviously, as we're talking here, she's on the wrong lead. She lugs in pretty sharply. There's more in the tank with Zany, I'm thinking.
She's just looking around. Her ears are forward. She's cruising. She's a very exciting Oaks prospect. Probably the one you have to beat going forward for sure. And obviously, after the wire, she just galloped out strong, kind of got back to business a little bit. I don't know where they're going to run her next. I didn't see where they mentioned for a next possible start. For me, I think I want to see 2 more for her rather than the final round prep. In April, but it seems to be the MO now. 2 preps into these early May races as opposed to 3 or more. But I probably would want to see her. I'd want to eliminate the conversation about greenness and professionalism and just get her going a little bit more. And it's not like that race seemed to take a ton out of her.
Yeah, there is no 3-year-old filly dirt race at Tampa on Tampa Derby Day. So you're probably looking at, seems to me like it would probably be Gulfstream Oaks, Ashland, or Gazelle based on these connections and what they've done in the past. I don't think they're sending her to Oaklawn for the Honeybee to then run back into fantasy in 22 days. So that seems unlikely. But I agree. I mean, I think she's a horse that would benefit from having another run, especially if you see some of the lugging in, the greenness, the immaturity. Obviously, there's a ton of people there on Oaks Day. It's going to be run under the lights as well. So you want to have as much foundation, I think, as you possibly can. One thing we can't question at all with this filly is ability. I did notice, and this conversation just kills me every single time, people are already clamoring for her to run against males. I don't think anybody's going to be overwhelmed by her being in any race against males. She got a 91 Brisnet speed rating, an 81 Beyer speed figure. Even if you think there's more in the tank, she needs to be pointed to the Oaks.
That's the problem with people having keyboards. Like, have keyboard, will type. No filter. That's a tough opinion. My opinion.
I was a heavy favorite to make a sarcastic comment like that, so I'm glad that the prop on that went to you at a plus odd price. So that's good for everyone playing along. But we'll see Zany hopefully twice more, as you mentioned, more than likely once more. Either way, I'll be excited to see how she performs where we do eventually see her. She will bid, of course, to become the 3-year-old Eclipse Award winner. The 3-year-old Eclipse Award winner from last year was in action over the weekend as well in Saturday's Bayakoa, a grade 3 at Oaklawn Park. Nitrogen made her seasonal debut for Mark Casse, who's winning at this point basically 1 out of every 2 races that he enters horses in at Oaklawn. It's been an incredible start to the meet for the Hall of Famer. And I got to tell you, buddy, as good as Nitrogen looked last year, she may have looked better in this race than she ever has before.
I thought she was awesome in this spot. There's a lot of, speaking of the interweb, there's a lot of chatter about the run that Mark Casse is on. And it wasn't that long ago where he was kind of venting to some of us at Churchill that he couldn't win a race. This stuff goes in cycles for these guys. Sometimes the conditions align and everything aligns, and sometimes it doesn't. She was spectacular. I thought she was a little bit more professional, if you could even say that. It felt like there was more in the tank. It wasn't the easiest trip in the world to go 3 wide at Oaklawn against a soft pace. It didn't even matter though. Like, she was never losing this race. She was strong from start to finish, and I would anticipate a pretty huge year for her. And we were just kind of joking about these guys wanted to do 2 preps into the Derby, what have you. Mark Cassie's not afraid of running horses, and the game is better for it. And we're going to see her in all the big ones. And, she's got the benefit of being a little versatile, too. They can probably do some other things with her as well. So, yeah, this was stout. This was very stout.
Yeah, and the horse that, for those that aren't terribly familiar with it, so the 4 horse that you see in the frame is Quiet Side, who granted is not the Quiet Side that we probably became acquainted with prior to the Oaks last year, but did run an improved race in this race. But the one in this race is Narazuri, who is also from the Mark Casse barn and was coming into this race in razor sharp fashion. She had just won a stake race on New Year's Day. And I know from dealing with Mark as far as races go, that Narazuri is a filly that he's pretty high on. And Nitrogen just, from this point to the wire, just makes Narazuri look rather ordinary. And that
Yeah.
just says a lot more about Nitrogen than it does Narazuri. She pulls away from her pretty easily. Still with some of the antics you referenced, switched leads. She's not always the cleanest in terms of changing leads and staying on a straight course. But you know what? When it works out, the one thing that overcomes all of that is quickness. And she's fast. This was a really strong performance, a buyer speed figure of 97. I think a brisnet number of somewhere in that vicinity as well. I'm actually pulling them up as we talk, so it would put her among the better races that she's run, a 97 brisnet speed rating as well. So I think this is Mark Casse, right? So we'll probably see her in the Azeri. We'll probably see her in either the Apple Blossom or the La Troyenne. Hopefully the La Troyenne on Oaks Day, so that everybody can get an experience with her again. But yeah, this looks like a filly that's poised to have a really, really big year. You did reference, of course, she's also a multiple graded stake winner on turf. And, I think one of the things that I'm going to always appreciate about Nitrogen, and while, sure, I mean, her speed figures could be faster, who knows how good she might get, being this good on dirt after being that good on turf, it's not nearly as easy as she makes it look.
No, it's rare. And I think the other thing on speed figures for fillies and mares is, I don't know, it feels like over the last 5 to 10 years, there's just been a sort of a holistic or macro level decline in figures of these horses. I don't know if it was the introduction of HISA and some of the other rules surrounding these races. We could speculate all day long on that. But I feel like the numbers of yesteryear for these fillies and mares, in particular the fillies, they just don't happen anymore for whatever reason. So I don't put too much stock into the quote lower figures that she's running. Um, she's just very good.
Yeah, she's very good. In fact, that's I think what matters most. That what she's doing it well. She's doing it impressively, and I look forward to her next start as well. And what is really shaping up at this point as what could be a very, very big year. Well, a couple of horses that were debuting on Saturday that we're going to close out by mentioning ran in a maiden race at Tampa Bay Downs, and this was one of those maiden races, Travis, that was just too good to not mention. I know connections of each going into it felt very strongly. Powershift and Emerging Market, who ran in a maiden special weight on Saturday afternoon at Tampa, and we're going to get a look at that. These guys really threw it down. They ended up 13 and a half lengths clear of everybody else, earned just really sky high speed figures. This was the sixth race from Saturday. You're going to see them hook up now inside the quarter pole and head home. These are two horses with a really bright future.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, this is a $32,000 maiden race, and it kind of speaks to the idea that for some of these bigger barns, it's not about the purse; it's about the timing and the location of races. And this was clearly an intention start of two talented horses. They wanted to get going to see what could happen between now and Triple Crown season. I thought they were very comparable. The margin of victory from Emerging Market probably could be attributed to the fact that he was able to ride the rail most of the way. I think if you were to swap trips, it might have been an alternative result. I think they're very much so on even ability levels at this point. I will say, I do believe Chad Brown horses move forward quite a bit in their second start. Todd Pletcher horses do too, but it does feel like Chad's moved forward a little bit more. He doesn't quite crank them up as much for their debut. But on the far turn, you could just tell that they both have talent. They're precocious. They're moving nicely, and they threw it down. I think that maybe a concern for me would be that was a extremely stiff test. Like they really laid it out. And a lot of times when you see horses run such big debuts, it is really tough to come right back and do it again. And it's not like we're talking about a November race. We are in early February, so the margin is tight for them going forward. I have a feeling. I think this is how this plays out for these two. I think one of them ends up in the Preakness and the other ends up in the Belmont. And it doesn't take much of an imagination to understand who ends up in the Preakness because it's something Chad Brown has done before. And Todd Pletcher with the Belmont too. That would be my two reads on these. I think it's going to be an awful lot to ask to wheel them back and win the next round. I mean, one of them's still the maiden. It's just going to be asking a lot. But I don't think it's asking too much to think about races like the Belmont and the Preakness for them.
Yeah, I mean, and it's at a time on the calendar that becomes like a little bit of, it's so tempting to just sort of go all in, especially with Powershift, who's still a maiden, and try and get him to the Derby because he ran, as good a maiden race as basically anybody in the entire crop. And then at the same time, you also realize that, but this could be your Belmont horse. This could be your Travers horse. It's sort of what the Kentucky Derby obviously is the be all end all for all of these connections. And as you mentioned, I mean, he's a $500,000 horse. The third place finisher was a $1.1 million gun runner. So, I mean, this was a race with just a lot of talent on paper and obviously a lot of talent on the racetrack as well. So you sort of feel obligated to try and move forward and get him there. But, now you're at a point where you've got to figure out races for multiple different horses. You don't want to run against them. Somebody's got to go to the Florida Derby. Somebody's probably going to the Bluegrass. Somebody's going to the Wood. Yeah, I think I agree with your assessment. If they each miss the Derby, the horse that ends up in the Preakness is almost certainly Emerging Market, and that would make a lot of sense based on what the connections have done in the past. But we'll see. It's a tough spot to get two more preps into them unless you're going back to Tampa right away for the Tampa Bay Derby. And as you're saying, I mean, second start, 28 days later, you might want to bet against them in that scenario.
Yeah, and doesn't Chad have another horse for the Tampa Bay Derby that ran well the other day?
He does.
For
He has a horse that ran very well at Gulfstream named Canaletto. So, and he is probably unlikely to run those horses against each other.
yeah.
So, yeah, it's I guess
Then where do
better.
you go? I mean, the Fountain of Youth is how far from now?
Only 3 weeks. He won't come back that
That
quick.
ain't happening. So, yeah, well, that's
Yeah,
tough.
you're
That's
looking
tough.
at final preps at that point, and so you're either going to the Virginia Derby or you're going to one of the final preps, Wood or Bluegrass, one of those. So yeah, it's a tough spot to find something afterwards. But what we know is that these horses are likely to both have a very, very bright future,
Yeah.
no question about it. So huge weekend of preps, of course. This weekend upcoming, the Risen Star from Fairgrounds, a spectacular 12 race card drawn at Fairgrounds. It's Mardi Gras weekend as well. So what a time to be in New Orleans. They don't allow people like you and I to go there on weekends like this. We can't
And it's
handle.
isn't it Valentine's Day on Saturday?
It is Valentine's Day on Saturday. Yeah. So just
Oh,
another way to spice it up. In
big
fact, next
commercial
strike,
racket weekend.
no question about it. One thing we know is that the best place to play along will be right here on twinspires.com. Later in the week, we'll have some previews promoting some of the contest action, some of the promotions as well. We've got a lot going on. Stable alerts. We had a stable alert horse run back last week. Grittiness was a stable alert horse, came back and finished second in the Withers at a good price. So play along. Make sure you're using the stable alert function, and you'll probably hear me complain about bad trips here and there, making my expert picks. Travis, looking forward, of course, to having you back behind the mic for opening weekend as opposed to opening night at Churchill Downs coming up in late April.
Yeah, should be good. We'll go to Virginia first, though.
Oh, that's right. You'll be, of course,
Yeah.
Colonial Downs. Colonial, great track. Can't encourage people enough to make their way to
Underrated.
Colonial.
Yeah,
Very
much so
underrated.
Yeah.
Horse heaven. So if you're within shouting distance, get to Colonial for the Virginia Derby. Just avoid Frank Hoff. That's going to be it for this TwinSpires Weekend Rewind. For Travis Stone and everybody at TwinSpires, Nick Tammaro here. Until next time, best of luck.